He was barely 5'2". Thin. Quiet. The kind of kid you'd pick out of a crowd as the easiest target in the room. Bullies looked at Gray Yun and saw a victim. They were about to learn the most dangerous lesson of their lives, that the weakest-looking person in the school was the one they should have feared the most. Because at Unjiang High, muscle ruled everything. And Gray Yun was here to prove that the mind cuts deeper than any fist. It started, as these things always do, with an ambush. Gray Yun stood alone, surrounded. "Did you call my name?" one of the bigger boys sneered. A skeleton barely walking around. "My height, just over 5'2". A fight I couldn't even start on equal ground to begin with. That was how Gray saw it, cold and clear. He was outnumbered and outmatched in every way that a schoolyard measures strength. His body was trembling. He was, by his own admission, in fear. And most people, in that moment, would have frozen, or begged, or run. But Gray Yun did something else. "At this moment, the fear that I am feeling is just an illusion," he told himself. "But I must not show it." Because fear was a weapon that only worked if the enemy could see it. So he buried it. He suppressed his emotions and made them feel the fear he was feeling instead. He looked up at the biggest one, the leader trembling with rage, and instead of panicking, he started calculating. "Look at him trembling," the bully laughed, not realizing the boy in front of him was already 3 moves ahead. "I just need to get rid of this one first," Gray thought. "It doesn't even have to be quick. Time to eat dirt." And then he moved. There was no wind-up, no warning, no fair fight, because Gray Yun did not believe in fair fights. Fair fights were for people with the size and the numbers to win them. He had neither. What he had was ruthlessness and a plan. Whoom. Whoosh. He struck first and struck dirty. He grabbed a fistful of dirt and threw it straight into the leader's eyes. "Ah," the bully screamed, "he chucked freaking dirt in my eyes. My eyes." And in the half-second of blindness that followed, Gray was already on him. Whack. Crash. Thud. The biggest, loudest, most confident boy in the group hit the ground before he even understood what was happening. The others froze. This wasn't supposed to happen. The skeleton was supposed to cower. Instead he was standing over their leader, calm, breathing hard, and utterly in control. "Didn't I tell you," Gray said quietly, "that if you make a scene again, I would gouge your eyes out?" It was not a threat shouted in anger. It was a promise delivered flatly, and that was what made it terrifying. The boys who had come to beat him now understood that they had walked into something they could not handle. He finished it the way he started it, with cold efficiency. A belt came off. Crock. Whack. Thud. One by one, he put them down, not because he was stronger, but because he was smarter, faster to commit, and willing to do what they weren't. "You pathetic scumbag," one of them spat, even as he fell. "Did you even understand why you're getting owned by me? It's because you're pitifully predictable." That was Gray Yun's entire philosophy in a single sentence. Strength could be predicted. Size could be measured. But a mind that refused to lose, that calculated every angle and struck without hesitation, that was something these boys had never faced. And when it was over, the toughest crew in the area was on the pavement, and the small quiet boy simply walked away. What made the fight so unsettling to watch was not the violence. It was the calm. Most people, when they fight, are carried by rage or panic, swept along by feelings too big to control. Gray Yun was the opposite. Every movement he made was a decision. He had looked at 4 bodies bigger than his own and, in the space of a breath, sorted them by threat, chosen his first target, and committed to a strategy with no hesitation and no mercy. He understood something the bullies never would, that in a fight you cannot win by strength, the only currency left is will. And Gray Yun had more will than anyone who had ever underestimated him. He did not enjoy hurting them. There was no cruelty in his eyes, no pleasure, only the flat focus of a boy solving a problem. That, more than the dirt or the belt or the blows, was what would haunt the ones who survived him. They had come expecting a coward and met a mind that treated their whole world of fists and fear like a puzzle already solved. The story did not stay quiet for long. Rumors, once born, spread instantly. I heard that Colton Choi got his ass handed to him, students whispered in the halls. He even brought his entourage. They all ate the pavement. Some were jealous of the beaten bully. Some exaggerated the story until it became legend. And some, the dangerous ones, believed that they could defeat the rumored student in question. Because that is how it works in a world ruled by violence. The moment you become known as strong, you become a target. Every fighter who heard the name Gray Yun felt the same itch, the need to test himself, to be the one who took down the rumored kid. Gray had won his fight. But in winning, he had painted a mark on his own back. And so he arrived at Unjiang High, a new school, a new set of predators, carrying a reputation that walked in ahead of him. Gray Yun, the board read. Transferred from Weary Middle School. Unknown. He took his seat quietly, the small unremarkable transfer student, and for a moment it seemed like he might just disappear into the background. But the rumors had followed him through the door, and at a school like Unjiang, a reputation for violence was a debt that always came due. Something's about to happen, one student muttered, and he was right. Because a boy named Ben Park had heard the stories, and Ben Park was not the kind to let them slide. Everybody shut up, Ben announced, and the classroom went still. He walked up to Gray's desk, pulled up a chair, and sat down across from the quiet boy with the easy confidence of someone who had never lost. Gray Yun, he said. And the interrogation began. The rumors say, Ben started, you beat up Colton Choi, Royce Na, and Eddie Moore at the bridge passage yesterday, then fled the scene. That true? He leaned in, watching for a flinch, a stammer, anything. But Gray Yun didn't give him one. Predictable, Gray thought, and answered without heat. The rumors were true. Ben's smile tightened. Because one of those boys, Royce Na, was his cousin. I could care less about that idiot Colton, Ben said. But one of the others you beat, Royce, is my cousin. And so. He let the sentence hang, the unspoken demand clear, apologize, grovel, show fear. I'll just accept your apology and leave it at there, Ben offered, generous in the way a predator is generous right before it strikes. You should know who I am, so fear. And here is where Gray Yun showed exactly who he was. Because he did not apologize. He did not flinch. He looked at the confident boy across from him and gave him 2 reasons, delivered as calmly as a teacher correcting homework. 1, there's no reason for me to apologize, he said. And 2. He paused. I have no fucking idea who you are. The classroom held its breath. It was the most disrespectful thing Ben Park had heard in his life, and it was said without a trace of fear. Why you, Ben snarled, his composure cracking. But underneath the anger, something else flickered, something closer to disbelief. This small quiet kid had just looked him dead in the eye and dismissed him completely. The other students watched, stunned. "The hell are these guys doing?" one whispered. "That psycho, Ben Park," another breathed, because Ben had a reputation of his own, and no one talked to him like that. But Gray Yun had already measured Ben the same way he measured everyone, coldly, precisely, looking for the truth underneath the bluster. And what he saw was a boy who talked a lot, threatened a lot, but wasn't nearly as sure of himself as he pretended to be. Philip Kim, another student who knew the score, tried to warn Gray about the world he'd just walked into. "Since you and I appear to be so similar," he said, "let me give you some advice. You shouldn't meet eyes with that guy Ben. He might kill you." It was the standard wisdom of Unjang Hai: keep your head down, don't provoke the dangerous ones, survive. But Gray Yun did not keep his head down. He never had. That was the whole problem, and the whole point. The confrontation twisted in a way no one expected. Because when the tension reached its peak, when everyone was sure it would end in blood, it was Ben Park who backed down. Faced with a boy who showed absolutely no fear, who had already beaten 3 fighters and spoke of gouging out eyes like he was discussing the weather, Ben did the math and didn't like the answer. "Oh," he laughed suddenly, "sorry for making a scene." Ben Park apologizes to him, the students murmured, unable to believe it. He's got the skills all right. But in addition, he's brave. And also, pretty damn lucky. The whole class watched the feared Ben Park walk away from the small transfer student, and a new legend was quietly born in the halls of Unjang. But make no mistake. Ben Park had not forgiven anything. He had only calculated that a direct fight, right now, in front of everyone, was a risk he didn't want to take. And behind that fake apology, a very different plan was already forming. "Ben, that fucking clown," he seethed to himself once he was out of sight, "making me look stupid in front of everyone." His pride had been wounded in front of the entire class, and boys like Ben Park do not let wounds like that heal. They bandage them with revenge. And so Ben began to scheme, the way cowards scheme, by finding someone else to do the hurting. He pulled out his phone and started scrolling through his contacts, hunting for exactly the right weapon. Phoenix Lee. Ash Lee. Donald Na. Name after name slid past, each one considered and discarded. "This one's a bit too intimidating," he muttered, thinking better of one. "I shouldn't call him. Hard pass." He wasn't looking for the strongest fighter. He was looking for the right one, someone with a grudge, someone with bad blood, someone who would enjoy crushing Gray Yun as much as Ben wanted him crushed. And then he found the name. "This one," Ben said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "He's got bad blood with Ben too. Jimmy Bay. Fucking perfect. Jimmy Bay, a fighter with his own reputation and his own reasons to hurt people." Ben made the call, and the trap began to close. "If you can stay like that for 2 hours, Jimmy was saying to someone on the other end of a very different scene, I won't hit you. Cool. Because Jimmy Bay was exactly the kind of monster Ben was looking for, the kind who tortured for fun, who made people suffer just to watch them break. Giving up, Jimmy taunted his current victim, as the boy trembled beneath him. "Fucking perfect," Ben repeated, hanging up. He had found his weapon. Word of the scheme reached Gray through the same channels that spread every rumor at Unjang. Philip found him again, and this time the warning was heavier. "You know I was admitted to Unjang High, right?" Philip said. "And that Ben Park's here too. Apparently, Ben is scheming to crush you." The message was clear. The boy who had backed down in front of the whole class was now working in the shadows, gathering fighters, building a plan to take Gray Yun apart. He's got bad blood with Ben too, the whispers went. Jimmy Bay. The pieces were moving into place, and Gray Yun was at the center of the board. Then came the call. Gray's phone buzzed, an unknown number lighting up the screen. BZZZ, BZZZ, beep. He looked at it with the same flat, unreadable expression he gave everything. What does this guy's sorry ass want with me, he thought. On the other end was the beginning of everything, the first thread of a web that Ben Park was spinning to destroy him. What? A voice said, and Gray listened. What kind of fucking nonsense is that? Because the plan Ben had set in motion was already reaching out to pull Gray Yun into a fight he never asked for, against enemies who fought dirtier and crueler than any bully he'd faced yet. This was Unjiang High, a place where strength was currency and the strong preyed on the weak as a matter of routine. Gray Yun had walked in looking like the perfect victim, thin and small and quiet, and in 2 short days he had turned that assumption into a weapon. He had beaten a crew that outnumbered him, humiliated one of the school's most feared students without throwing a single punch, and become a name that echoed through every hallway. But every victory made him a bigger target, and now Ben Park was in the shadows, assembling monsters like Jimmy Bay to bring him down. The weak hero had announced himself. And the storm that would define him was only just beginning to gather. Because here is the truth about Gray Yun, the truth that Ben Park and Jimmy Bay and every fighter at Unjiang was about to learn the hard way. He was not strong in the way they understood strength. He would never be the biggest or the most powerful boy in any room. But he had something rarer and far more dangerous, a mind that refused to lose, a willingness to do whatever it took, and a cold nerve to stand in front of someone twice his size and feel nothing but calculation. Look at me trembling, he might as well have said. That fear is an illusion. I will not show it. And I will make you feel it instead. The bullies of Unjiang High thought they had found an easy mark. They had no idea they had just walked into the beginning of the most dangerous student the school had ever seen. Gray Yun sat with his phone buzzing in his hand, a scheme tightening around him, enemies gathering in the dark, and the same unshakable calm in his eyes that had put 3 fighters on the pavement. He was outnumbered. He was outsized. He was, by every measure that mattered to the boys who ruled this place, weak. And he was about to become their worst nightmare. This was only the first fight. And Gray Yun was just getting started. Ben Park had been humiliated in front of the entire class, and boys like Ben do not swallow that kind of shame. They feed it to someone else. So instead of facing Gray Yun himself, Ben went looking for a monster to do it for him, and he found one in a fighter named Jimmy Bay. But to point that monster at Gray, Ben would have to lie. And the lies were about to turn a quiet transfer student into the target of an entire pack. It started with a phone call. Philip, Ben's schemes had already reached Gray through the rumor mill. Apparently, Ben is scheming to crush you, Philip had warned. And he was right. Because Ben was on the phone, wearing an ugly grin, spinning a story for the fighter on the other end. Jimmy Bay. Graduated Gishan Middle School, moved on to Yusan High. A known name, a known temper, and exactly the kind of person Ben needed. And here is where Ben showed what he really was. He didn't just ask Jimmy for help. He manufactured a reason for Jimmy to want it. He said he would have beaten you good, Ben told Jimmy, if Donald hadn't interfered in the fight. And that he'd destroy you the next time he sees you. It was a lie, start to finish. Gray Yun had never said any such thing. He didn't even know who Jimmy Bay was. But Ben understood how to move people who fight for a living. You don't order them. You insult their pride and let their pride do the rest. So you just watch and see, Ben said sweetly, and on the other end, Jimmy Bay laughed his slow, cruel laugh. Coo. The trap was set, not with muscle, but with a rumor whispered into the right ear. And Jimmy Bay was no ordinary bully. When we see him, he's already in the middle of tormenting someone, casually, the way other people breathe. I told you, he says to a boy trembling beneath him, if you can stay like that for 2 hours, I won't hit ya. Coo. That was Jimmy's idea of fun, watching someone suffer, dangling mercy he never intended to give. Puck. Scram. Get lost, he snaps, tossing his victim aside like garbage. Cool. Hey, Jack. Because Jimmy wasn't working alone either. There was Jack Kong, another fighter, another piece of the pack that Ben was quietly assembling to bring down a single scrawny kid. And this is worth sitting with for a moment, because it tells you everything about the world Gray Yun lives in. Jimmy Bay did not need a reason to hurt people. He hurt them because he could, because it amused him, because in his world dominance was the only language anyone respected. The boy he tortured for 2 hours had done nothing to deserve it except be weaker than Jimmy. That was the whole crime. And when Ben Park handed Jimmy a target dressed up as a personal insult, he wasn't creating a villain. He was just aiming one that already existed. This is the food chain of Unjiang High and the schools around it, laid bare. The strong hunt the weak for sport, the ambitious use the strong as weapons, and everyone climbs by stepping on whoever is beneath them. Into that machine walked a small quiet boy who looked, to every predator in the building, like the bottom of the chain. Ben laid out the plan with the confidence of a coward who has finally found enough bodies to hide behind. This time, I'll destroy him completely, he said, savoring it. I'm gonna have to crush Gray. Gather the boys, bring him to me tomorrow. He was building an ambush, a whole crew of fighters converging on Gray Yun in a place of Ben's choosing. And he pulled Jack Kong deeper into it with a challenge dressed as an opportunity. Jack, you psycho, Ben said. This is a chance to show your loyalty and back it up. You're the lowest ranking in the Union too. That was how Ben recruited, by preying on the same hunger for status that ran through every fighter at these schools. Prove yourself. Move up. Crush the kid, and be somebody. And so, one by one, the wolves gathered. Meanwhile, in Gray's own classroom, a different kind of doubt was spreading. Because the students who actually sat next to Gray Yun looked at him and simply could not believe the stories. I don't know anything at all about his character, one thought, watching the quiet boy study. His height seems a little shorter than average. And his limbs are nothing but bones. Really studying, another wondered. A kid like that. It seemed impossible. The rumors said this boy had put 3 fighters on the pavement, but the boy in front of them was small, thin, bespectacled, buried in a book. A kid like that, you could get someone to believe it, they murmured, and the way he looks. Don't bet it, do you? The gap between the legend and the scrawny reality was so wide that half the school refused to close it. And this is the heart of what weak hero understands about a place like Unjiang High. Reputation is not truth. It is image. An image is a fragile thing. Even with Colton Choi, the bully Gray had beaten, gone from the picture, the school did not become peaceful. It stayed exactly what it was. This place was still Unjang High, infested with hungry hyenas. Acting like they're tough as fuck, one student sneered at the posturing that filled the halls. I'm fine with Colton being gone, but they're getting on my nerves. Maybe Colton was never as tough as he made himself out to be. Take one predator out, and the rest do not scatter. They simply circle the next weakest looking thing in the room. And to most of Unjang, the weakest looking thing was Gray Yun. That is why the petty disrespect started. Because a boy who looks like easy prey attracts a certain kind of person, the ones too small to be real threats but too cowardly to leave the vulnerable alone. In the bathroom, one of them made his move. Out of the way, loser, he sneered, shoving Gray at the sink. Splish. Ah, your fucking piss is on me, he barked, twisting an accident into an insult. You klutz. You're not supposed to shame it all over the place. Coo. It was nothing, a shove, a taunt, a small ugly act of dominance from a nobody. But it was the kind of thing that happens 100 times a day to anyone the school has decided is beneath it. And here we see how Gray Yun's mind works, even in the smallest moments. I can just crush them along with the more obvious threats, he thought, coldly weighing the boy who had shoved him. But these small acts of disrespect are getting annoying. He was not afraid. He was calculating, as always. And then came the observation that cuts to the core of the whole story. People are all slaves to the image, Gray thought. I must look like the easiest prey out there to these fuckers. He understood exactly why they came for him. Not because he had done anything. But because of how he looked. Thin. Quiet. Small. To Unjang High, appearance was everything, and Gray Yun wore the appearance of a victim. The tragedy, and the danger, was that everyone kept mistaking the costume for the person underneath. But beneath the cold calculation, weak hero lets us glimpse something heavier in Gray, a weariness that runs deeper than any schoolyard fight. Because Gray Yun had been through this before, at other schools, in other hallways. There's no need to repeat what happened earlier, he thought, and the memory carried a weight of exhaustion. Something must have happened again. I'm tired. This was the loneliness of a boy who had learned, the hard way, what happens to the people around him. During the short time I was absent, he remembered, I was supposed to be as quiet as a corpse. Invisible. That was the survival strategy of someone who had seen too much, disappear, provoke nothing, become a bystander. Draw no attention, and no one gets hurt. And yet Gray could not quite manage it. Because he was not built to simply watch. When he saw the strong crush the weak, something in him refused to look away, even when looking away would have kept him safe. It was the same instinct that had made him throw dirt in a bully's eyes rather than cower. I should just stay quiet after all, he told himself, again and again. Becoming a bystander. For now. But the words rang hollow, because staying quiet was the one thing Gray Yun had never truly been able to do. That contradiction, the boy who wants to disappear but cannot stop himself from standing up, is the engine that drives everything that follows. Around him, the pack kept moving. Jimmy Bay and Jack Kong and the others Ben had gathered were closing in, drawn by a lie and the promise of an easy target. The class kept doubting, unable to reconcile the scrawny boy at the desk with the fighter in the rumors. The petty bullies kept testing, shoving and sneering, sure they had found the easiest prey in the school. And Gray Yun sat in the middle of it all, small and quiet and underestimated by every single person in the building, weighing them one by one with the same flat, patient stare. The pieces were nearly all in place now. Ben Park had his crew. Jimmy Bay had his grudge, manufactured though it was. The ambush was set for the next day. And Gray Yun, the boy everyone had written off as weak, was walking straight into it, because he always did. He knew the fight was coming. He had probably known since the moment his phone first buzzed with a stranger's number. And still he did not run, did not beg, did not bend. He simply prepared, in that cold methodical way of his, to face a pack of fighters who thought a scrawny kid with glasses would be the easiest win of their lives. They were about to make the same mistake Colton Choi made. The same mistake Ben Park made in front of the whole class. The mistake that everyone at Unjang High kept making, over and over, because they could not see past the costume. They looked at Gray Yun and saw bones and glasses and silence. They did not see the mind behind the glasses, the will behind the silence, the ruthlessness coiled inside that small frame like a spring. Ben thought he had found a victim to feed to his monsters. He had actually just pointed his monsters at the most dangerous student in the school. And tomorrow, when the pack finally closed in, Unjang High was going to learn, one broken fighter at a time, exactly what the weak hero was capable of. The trap was set. The wolves were gathering. And Gray Yun was ready. Ben Park had spent 2 days assembling a pack of fighters to destroy one scrawny kid. Now the trap was finally ready to spring. 5 against 1, at a place of Ben's choosing, with a crew of hardened brawlers waiting in ambush. It was supposed to be an execution. What Ben Park didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that they had picked a fight with the wrong person. And Gray Yun was about to turn their perfect ambush into their worst mistake. The pack mobilized. "We got out at 4 p.m., Philip warned Gray, so if you're at the underpass by then, you'll run into them. It's 4 p.m. now. Viroom. Viroom." The fighters rolled out on their scooters, engines screaming through the streets, converging on the underpass where they planned to corner Gray Yun far from any teachers or witnesses. This was how cowards fought, not one-on-one in the open, but many-on-one in the shadows, stacked so heavily in their favor that losing was impossible. Or so they believed. Back at school, the doubt still lingered. The students who had watched Gray couldn't reconcile what they were seeing. They can't believe what they witnessed in front of them, one thought. They're refusing to believe it. Because the boy at the desk was so small, so quiet, so ordinary. But there was one student who had looked closer, who had caught something in Gray's eyes that chilled him. Look how obvious it is to all of them, he thought, remembering. An all-knowing and all-determined look in his eyes. What I saw. He had seen past the costume, seen the cold certainty underneath, and it frightened him more than any rumor. The others laughed off the stories. This one knew better. And here weak hero does something clever, it lets the tension breathe with a moment of pure comedy. Because before the fighters sprang their deadly ambush, they made a stop. At a pool hall run by a strikingly beautiful part-timer. "Welcome," she said sweetly. "What drink can I get you?" Heart melt. And these hardened brawlers, these boys who tortured people for fun, melted into giggling fools. "She's a goddess," one gasped. "A goddess." Boom, jackpot. 2 coffees then. "I heard she looks like a hottie from the TV dramas." The boys went yesterday, got coffee and everything. "It's a small," human touch that makes the violence that follows hit harder. These weren't monsters in a vacuum. They were teenagers, flirting and joking one minute, and beating a kid half to death the next. Then it was time. The crew rode to the underpass. Virum. SKR. Are we a bit early? One asked as they arrived. Hey Jack, I think we've arrived a little early. Bing bong, bang bong, the distant school bell rang. They settled into wait, a wall of fighters blocking the path Gray Yun would have to walk. And the numbers were staggering. Because it wasn't just Ben's original crew anymore. Word had spread, and fighters had gathered from all over, Yusun High students, Jimmy Bay, Jack Kong, and more names circling the same prey. Gerard Jean from Dui Middle School. Alex So, a brawler who had fought every fight of his life on sheer guts and grit. A whole ecosystem of violence, converging on one boy. And then Gray Yun walked into it. 5 opponents surrounded him, cutting off every exit. Get over here, one sneered. Cool guy, cool. Yank. They grabbed him, hemmed him in, 5 fighters against one small kid with glasses. And for the first time, we see Gray Yun do something we haven't seen before. He hesitates. 5 opponents, he thought, coldly measuring the odds. Can I do it? I've never tried it before. Should I submit to them for now? Because Gray was not reckless. He was a calculator, and the math of 5 hardened fighters was genuinely dangerous, even for him. For a moment, the boy who never bent considered bending, just to survive. But his enemies didn't want submission. They wanted a show. Seeing how long we've been waiting, one laughed, it looks like Ben made a run for it. Because of course Ben Park, the coward who started all this, had vanished the moment real violence was on the table, leaving his hired monsters to do the work. Show me your tears, the fighter demanded, looming over Gray. Even if it's just this prick, then I just might let you go. And he started smacking him. Smack. Smack. Do your little toys sing into the distance again, huh? Smack. Should I just toy with this kid for a bit and get him to leave? You beat 3 before. Smack. Should I just let this happen? And here is the moment that defines Gray Yun. Because he stood there, taking the blows, letting them think he was broken, letting them think he was just another victim who would cry and beg and run. Should I just let this happen? The fighter taunted, slapping him again and again. And Gray, blood on his face, glasses knocked askew, gave his answer. No. That single word, and everything changed. Splooch. He struck, fast and merciless, driving something straight into a fighter's eyes. Ah, the man screamed, hands flying to his face, ah-ch-ch-ch-ch-ch. And in that half-second of blindness, Gray was already moving through them. Smash. Snatch. What the hell, one of them cried as the small quiet kid detonated into violence. The boy who had seemed ready to submit was suddenly the most dangerous thing in the underpass, striking with the same cold ruthlessness he'd shown Colton Choi, but now against 5. Squeeze. Quit bitching, what's wrong? Gray thought as a fighter howled. Want me to call your mama? He fought dirty, fought smart, fought like someone who understood that when you're outnumbered, mercy is a luxury you cannot afford. He didn't try to win clean. He tried to win, period, and there is a world of difference. The brawl exploded outward, dragging in more and more fighters. This guy, one gasped, watching Gray tear through them, he's way more reckless than he seems. We're in trouble. You arrogant dickwads, another spat, do you think you can handle what you've just got into? Again. Because Gray Yun was not going down. Every time they thought they had him, he was back on his feet, striking, calculating, refusing to break. Thwack. Wish. Bodies hit the ground. The perfect 5-on-1 ambush was dissolving into chaos, and the boy at the center of it was still standing. And then the players started arriving. "Hey there," a group announced. "You Sun High students. Who the fuck are you?" one snarled as a newcomer waded into the fight. "Coming out of nowhere and kicking my friend in the gut, wanna die?" "Jack, that's Gerard Jean from Dewey Middle School." The brawl had become a magnet, pulling in fighter after fighter, old rivalries and fresh grudges all colliding in one place. "Hey, you fucking sons of biatchs," someone roared, and the underpass became a battlefield. Then, at last, the man behind it all reappeared. "Oh wow," a voice crowed, "all of the most sorry-ass losers in one place." And there he was, Ben Park, strolling back in now that the odds had been softened, the coward returning to claim credit for a fight he'd been too afraid to start. "Ben Park," someone shouted. "You bastard. You look overly excited to see me," Ben smirked. "Could it be that you came here to get me?" He surveyed the carnage his scheme had created, the fighters he'd gathered, the chaos he'd unleashed, all to bring down one boy who had embarrassed him in front of a class. But the fight had grown beyond Ben's control, and a new player was about to tip the balance. Because as the sides formed in the chaos, a mysterious fighter looked over the wreckage, measured Gray Yun, and made a choice. "Looks like I'm on this side, right?" he said, and stepped in beside the scrawny kid everyone had come to destroy. Anywho, back to business. On the gutsy kid's team. For the first time since he'd arrived at Unjiang, Gray Yun was not entirely alone. Someone had watched him stand against impossible odds and decided that this was the side worth fighting on. This is the world of weak hero in full. A place where a wounded ego can summon an army, where fighters flirt with pretty girls one minute and stomp a kid the next, where cowards like Ben Park hide behind hired muscle and only show their faces once the danger has passed. And into that world walks Gray Yun, outnumbered 5-1, cornered, smacked, humiliated, and still refusing to fall. He had walked into a perfect ambush and turned it into a brawl that pulled in half the fighters in the district. He had considered submitting, and then chosen, with a single cold word, to fight instead. And now, bloodied but unbroken, with an unexpected ally at his side, he stood in the middle of the storm Ben Park had built to destroy him. Ben thought he had assembled enough monsters to finally break the weak hero. He was about to discover, along with every fighter in that underpass, that Gray Yun did not break. He calculated. He endured. And when the moment came, he struck harder than anyone his size had any right to. The ambush was sprung. The pack had gathered. And the boy they had all come to crush was still standing, still fighting, still terrifyingly, impossibly in control. The real brawl was just getting started, and Gray Yun was exactly where he always ended up, in the center of it, against the odds, and far more dangerous than anyone believed. For as long as Gray Yun had been fighting, he had fought alone. He beat his enemies alone, he bled alone, and he walked away alone. It was the only way he knew. But in the middle of Ben Park's ambush, something happened that had never happened before. A fighter looked at the scrawny kid everyone had come to destroy and chose to stand beside him. And for the first time in his life, Gray Yun was not the only dangerous person in the fight. "Looks like I'm on this side, right?" the newcomer said, stepping in beside Gray. "On the gutsy kid's team." This was an unfamiliar experience for Gray Yun. He who had always fought and survived alone. This time, it was different from that past. It was a small thing, one fighter choosing a side, but for a boy who had spent his whole life as an island, it landed like a shock. He didn't ask for help. He never did. And yet here was someone, unasked, deciding that Gray Yun was worth fighting for. The fighter's name was Alex So, and he had a history with the people who had set up this ambush. He turned to Ben Park, and to the crew Ben had gathered, and the temperature dropped. And speaking of Bay, Alex thought, cold with old grudges. If he wanted to see me, why didn't he come here himself? Why did he ask you to bring me to him, Jack Kong? Because Alex So understood, the same way Gray did, that the whole thing had been engineered. The lies, the summons, the pack assembled under false pretenses. He had been maneuvered here just like Gray had, and Alex So was not the kind of person who forgave being played. Why don't you jump into that fight? Alex snarled at the fighters, like I did on that day. Or do you want one of your other faces rearranged, so you could never challenge me again, you fucking scumbag? And then Alex So showed exactly why the schemers had wanted him controlled rather than confronted. Whack. Thud. Pow. He tore into Ben's crew with a ferocity that made even Gray's brutal efficiency look restrained. He's fast, someone gasped, watching Alex move. Alex So, they had thought, was just one of Ben's peripheral players, a minor piece. They were catastrophically wrong. He was a monster, and now he was a monster on Gray Yun's side. The brawl became a rout. Alex So grabbed and slammed and struck, dismantling fighter after fighter. You puny little shit, he laughed, a wild joy in it. Ahahaha. Jackass. Thud. Zing. Krish. Pow. Where Gray fought like a surgeon, cold and precise, Alex fought like a storm, loud and overwhelming and gleeful. Do you see how stupid you are now that you've taken a blunt? He taunted a fallen enemy. Who the fuck do you think you are? And there was much more where that came from. Together, the calculating boy and the raging fighter carved through the ambush that had been built to bury them both. But even Alex So, in the middle of the chaos, noticed something that stopped him cold. He noticed Gray Yun. He noticed the scrawny kid with the glasses holding his own against fighters twice his size, and it did not compute. It's not nice to gang up on one guy, is it? Alex thought, and then, watching Gray, even though I'm not one-on-one in a battle of strength. So damn, keeping up against a freak like this. What kind of strength is that? Because that was the mystery that everyone who fought Gray eventually ran into. He should not have been able to do what he did. His arms were thin. His frame was small. And yet he hit like something far heavier, moved with a will that refused to break, and kept standing long after his body should have quit. Even a seasoned brawler like Alex So couldn't make sense of it. Alex So's own style was terrifying in a different way. Collision isn't for grabbing, he thought, correcting his own technique mid-fight. Should have just thrown a punch. Crunch. Grab. Thud. Pow, pow, pow. He grabbed heads, wrenched limbs, slammed bodies into the ground with a wrestler's cruelty. Craw, a fighter screamed as Alex twisted him. Or grabbed the head like this, Alex mused. Don't you? Kai SSK, whap. Crack. It was ugly and it was effective, and one by one bends. Hired fighters stopped getting up. That's enough, stop, someone finally cried, "You fucking meatheads." The ambush had completely collapsed. And through it all, Gray Yun and Alex So stood, bloodied but unbeaten, in the middle of the wreckage of Ben Park's grand scheme. The pack that had gathered to destroy the weak hero had been scattered across the pavement, and the two people they had underestimated most were the only ones still standing. And here weak hero does what it does best, it drops us out of the violence and into something almost mundane, so the whole thing feels real. Because after the fight, there was a pool hall, and a strikingly pretty part-timer, and a strange kind of calm. "Well, that man's pretty chilling," someone remarked of Gray. "Did you see the look on that kid's face? What kind of wacky character is that?" The fighters, minutes removed from brutal violence, sat around a pool table making small talk, teasing each other, flirting with the part-timer as if nothing had happened. It's the tonal whiplash that makes Weak Hero feel like real teenage life, where horror and boredom and comedy all sit side by side in the same afternoon. "And can you explain why that chump raged along?" someone asked Alex about why he jumped into Gray's fight. "Don't get rude on me now," Alex deflected. "Think of it as a celebratory event for crushing you Sun High. He. I'm here because..." But the real answer was more complicated, tangled up in Alex So's own past. Because there were old wounds under his laughter. "You still heard about what happened, have you?" someone asked him quietly, and for a moment the grin slipped. Alex So fought on pure guts and grit, but somewhere behind that was a pain he carried, the kind that makes a person throw themselves into other people's fights just to feel something. He was not so different from Gray Yun in the end, a loner who couldn't quite stop caring, hiding it behind a very different mask. And this is where Weak Hero quietly plants one of its most important ideas. Because Alex So and Gray Yun, for all their differences, were two versions of the same wound. Both had been hurt by this world of fists and rankings. Both had learned to fight because fighting was the only language that kept them safe. And both hid something soft and human under a hard exterior, Alex behind his wild laughter, Gray behind his cold silence. The difference was that Alex So had found a way to feel alive again, throwing himself into other people's battles, laughing through the pain. Gray had not. Gray had simply closed the door and locked it, deciding that the safest thing to do with a heart in a world this cruel was to bury it. Watching them stand side by side in the wreckage of the ambush, you could see two possible futures for the same kind of boy, the one who let a little light back in, and the one still deciding whether he ever could. As for Gray himself, he did what he always did. He slipped away. Whoosh. Tap, tap. "He's fast," someone noticed. "Where'd he go?" "Hey, stick around and get some drinks with us," they called. But Gray was already gone. "I have things to do, unlike you," he thought, and vanished into the streets. Because even now, even with people who had fought beside him, even with something like camaraderie being offered for the first time, Gray Yun could not stay. He was built to be alone, or perhaps he had learned the hard way that staying close to people only got them hurt. Either way, the boy who had just survived a 5-on-1 ambush walked home by himself, exactly as he always had. And Ben Park, the architect of the whole disaster, ran. Snap. The pool balls scattered. Ben just got his 3 cousins beat too, someone reported, tallying the damage. "Damn it, you can't be. Jimmy Bay, we're out." And Ben and the guys ran off, fleeing the wreckage of the ambush they had built, humiliated for the second time by the boy they were so sure they could break. His grand scheme had cost him a small army of fighters and gained him nothing but a deeper, uglier grudge. Because that is the thing about a coward like Ben Park, humiliation does not humble him. It only makes him more dangerous, more desperate, more willing to reach for anyone who might finally do the job. Even as he fled, his mind was already turning back to his phone, back to his contacts, back to the hunt for a bigger monster. "Where's your response?" he demanded of one name after another. "Okay. No, I look like a punisher and get some yet I don't." To Donald Nah. "Fine, I'll report every prick in this." Donald Nah. Another fighter. Another weapon. Another body to throw at Gray Yun, because Ben Park would rather burn down the whole school than admit that a scrawny kid had beaten him twice. Meanwhile, the world around Gray kept expanding, new faces circling at the edges of the story. "A pretty boy," someone remarked of a pale, striking newcomer. "He's so pale." New fighters, new schools, new grudges, all of them beginning to orbit the name that was spreading through the district like wildfire. Yusun Hai must have taken care of them, right? Students whispered, trading rumors about who ranked where, who had beaten whom, who was worth fearing. The ecosystem of violence that Gray had stumbled into was far larger than one classroom, one ambush, one Ben Park. It stretched across schools and neighborhoods, a whole underworld of teenage fighters measuring each other by reputation and blood. And Gerard Jean, one of the fighters who had appeared in the brawl, lingered on the edges too, another piece of a board that kept growing more crowded. Gerard Jean and Alex So were here, waiting along with some others. The names were piling up, the alliances shifting, the grudges multiplying, and at the center of it all sat one small quiet boy who had done nothing but refuse to be a victim. This is what makes Gray Yun's story so gripping. He never asks for any of it. He does not want to rule the school or build a reputation or become the name everyone fears. He wants, if anything, to be left alone. But the world he lives in does not allow that. In a place ruled by violence, strength is a magnet, and the moment Gray revealed his, he became a target for every fighter, every schemer, every coward with a grudge and a phone full of contacts. He beat Ben's ambush. He gained, for one strange afternoon, something like an ally in Alex So. And still, before the blood had even dried, Ben Park was already dialing the next name, and new fighters were already circling. Gray Yun walked home alone through the district, small and quiet and utterly underestimated, carrying a reputation that grew more dangerous with every fight he won. Behind him, Alex So nursed his old wounds and his wild grin. Ben Park nursed his humiliation and reached for Donald Nah. And somewhere out there, more fighters were hearing the name of the scrawny kid from Unjiang who put grown brawlers on the pavement, and deciding, one by one, that they wanted to be the one to finally take him down. The ambush had failed. The pack had scattered. But the storm around the weak hero was not fading. It was only growing, and Gray Yun was walking straight into the heart of it, alone, the way he always did. Everyone kept asking the same question about Gray Yun. How does a boy that small, that thin, that ordinary, keep winning fights he has no business winning? In this episode, Weak Hero finally answers it. And the answer is not strength, or speed, or skill. It is a single vow that a broken boy made to himself on a summer day, a vow that turned him into someone who would rather bleed than lose. This is where we learn what Gray Yun is really made of. But first, the schemers kept scheming. Ben Park, humiliated twice, was still hunting for a way to bring Gray down, and now he turned to an old face, Colton Choi, the very first bully Gray had beaten. Ben found Colton and tried to recruit him into a new alliance. "Let's team up and crush him," Ben urged. "Gray Yun, that son of a bitch. There's nothing to lose." He dangled a bigger prize too, a path into the Yangdumpo Union, a network of fighters and connections that could make them both untouchable. Through Philip Kim's connections, am I right, Colton? If we just don't get caught off guard, there's no way we'd lose to that freak. It was the same cowardly math as always: gather enough bodies, stack the odds, and let someone else take the risk. But Colton Choi wanted no part of it. Because Colton had already fought Gray Yun, and he had learned the lesson the hard way. "Look at Colton, still cowering in fear," someone observed. And it was true. "Colton already knows better," Gray noted, watching his old enemy shrink back. "He lost his will to fight long ago. I can tell just by seeing him in the back." This is one of the quietly devastating things about Gray Yun: once you have truly lost to him, something inside you breaks. Colton had been a feared bully, and now he was a nervous shadow, unwilling to so much as look at the boy who had beaten him. Ben saw a potential weapon. Gray saw a man who had already been defeated so completely that he would never rise again. "This dumbass has not grasped how dangerous Gray Yun is," Colton thought of Ben, unwilling to explain what he knew. Ben, meanwhile, calculated his angles with the greed of a true opportunist. On the off chance this fool could actually beat Gray Yun, he schemed, then what happens to the hierarchy? This might be my chance to free ride my way to victory. I can think about the aftermath and the hierarchy when it's over. He didn't care about honor or fairness. He cared only about climbing, about using Gray's downfall as a ladder, no matter who did the actual fighting. And while the schemers plotted, the small daily cruelties continued, the kind that never make the rumors but grind a person down all the same. In class, a bully decided to have some fun with the scrawny transfer student. "Oh wow, clumsy me," he sneered, "I did an oopsie again, didn't I? I'm so sorry." And he spat on Gray's book. Spit. Drool. Again and again, he drooled and spat on Gray's notes, defiling the one quiet thing Gray was trying to do, ruining his studying just to watch him take it. "I just can't stop salivating," the bully laughed, spitting on the pages. It was petty and it was humiliating, the kind of small ugly power and nobody exercises over someone he thinks can't fight back. Gray Yun simply wiped the pages clean. Over and over, calmly, methodically, he wiped away the spit and kept working, giving the bully nothing. And that infuriated the bully more than any fight could. "You fucking loser," he spat. "You must have felt pretty hot after winning by a fluke. Delusional freaks like you need a real beating to understand their place. Stop wiping and answer me." Slap. He struck Gray across the face, demanding a reaction, demanding fear, demanding the response that would prove Gray was just another victim. "You dickwad, I'm talking here. Hey." Slap. And here, in Gray's cold internal monologue, we finally understand him. Staying alert every moment, time and time again, every day, he thought, is certainly exhausting. Because that was the truth beneath his calm, living like this, always watching, always calculating, always ready for the next attack, was a crushing weight. It would have been so much easier to simply be normal, to study in peace, to be left alone. But the world would not let him. So he stayed alert. He kept his cause just. He watched his enemies and waited. I've been keeping an eye on you, he thought of the bully, and take bold actions, and the opponent will get caught in your trap. And then came the sentence that is the key to his entire character. The only thing that matters to me, Gray thought, is not losing. Not winning. Not being respected. Not being feared. Just not losing. Because to Gray Yun, losing meant something far worse than a beating. And when the bully slapped him one time too many, Gray finally moved. I don't care if I'm called dirty, he thought, and struck. Smash! He drove a rolled-up book straight into the bully's throat, a vicious, precise, utterly ruthless blow. KFF, KFF, the bully choked, staggering back. You dirty fucker, someone cried, using a book too. But Gray did not care how it looked. Slap. TSK, hawk. Crash. He beat the bully down with the same cold efficiency he brought to every fight, not out of rage, but out of pure, unbending refusal to be the one who lost. Delusional freaks like you, he echoed the bully's own words back at him, need a real beating to understand their place. You little bitch, the bully wheezed from the floor, that's what you are, a sneaky, dirty little bitch. And that was exactly right, and Gray knew it, and he did not care. Because Gray Yun had learned, in the hardest way a boy can learn anything, that clean fights are for people who can afford to lose. He could not afford it. He would throw dirt, swing books, strike throats, do whatever it took, because the alternative, losing, was a thing he had sworn never to allow again. And now Weak Hero shows us why. It takes us back, to the memory that made Gray Yun who he is. I, Gray Yun, the narration begins, quiet and heavy. On that late summer day in my final year of middle school. And we see it, a younger Gray, in a sunlit room, in the aftermath of something that had broken him. I swore. The words land like a stone dropped into still water. Because whatever happened on that summer day, whatever loss, whatever humiliation, whatever helplessness he felt watching something he could not stop, it had carved a vow into the deepest part of him. I swore, he thought, to never. And the final words fall like a verdict. Lose again. To never lose again. That is the whole of Gray Yun, distilled into 3 words. Not a dream of glory. Not a hunger for power. A vow born of pain, a promise made by a boy who had already lost something so badly that he decided he would rather do anything, become anything, endure anything, than ever feel that way again. It explains the cold calculation, the willingness to fight dirty, the refusal to show fear, the way he keeps standing when his small body should have fallen. He is not fighting for victory. He is fighting against a memory. Every enemy he faces is standing between him and that summer day, and he will not go back there. He will never go back there. This is what makes Gray Yun so much more than a fighter, and Weak Hero so much more than a fight comic. Because underneath the brutal violence is a deeply wounded boy, carrying a grief so heavy that it turned into an unbreakable will. When he wipes the spit off his book and keeps studying, when he lets a bully slap him 3 times before he moves, when he does the cold cruel math of a fight he is outnumbered in, all of it comes from the same place, a boy who once lost everything, and swore on a summer day that he never would again. The exhaustion is real. Staying alert every moment is real. But so is the vow, and the vow is stronger. Ben Park schemes on, hunting for the alliance that will finally break the weak hero. Colton Choi cowers in the corner, a broken man who knows better than to try again. The bullies keep testing, keep spitting, keep slapping, sure that this small quiet kid must have a breaking point. And they are all making the same mistake, because they are looking at the wrong thing. They see the thin arms and the glasses and the silence. They do not see the summer day. They do not see the vow. They do not understand that the boy in front of them has already survived the worst thing that ever happened to him, and has decided, with everything he has, that he will never lose like that again. Gray Yun sat in that classroom, wiping the spit from his book, blood on his knuckles, the memory of that summer burning quietly behind his eyes. He did not want to be here. He did not want to fight. He wanted, more than anything, to simply be left alone. But the world he lived in would not allow it, and so he did the only thing he knew how to do. He stayed alert. He calculated. He endured the small cruelties and answered the large ones. And when the moment came, he refused, with everything in him, to lose. Because a long time ago, on a late summer day, a broken boy made himself a promise. And Gray Yun intended to keep it, no matter what it cost him, no matter how many fighters Ben Park sent, no matter how dirty he had to fight. He would never lose again. And his story was only just getting started. Gray Yun had made a vow to never lose again, and now the whole school had seen what that vow looked like in action. A boy beaten bloody on the classroom floor. Blood wiped calmly off a book. And a warning carved into the mind of every student who watched, do not ever mess with Gray Yun. But reputations are dangerous things. Because the same legend that made Unjang fear him was about to reach far beyond the school walls, and pull in an enemy Gray didn't even know existed. The classroom fight had changed everything. Leaving the bully crushed on the floor, Gray had wiped the blood off his book and simply gone back to what he was doing. It was a shocking yet powerful sight. That scene burned one thing into the consciousness of every student in the classroom: don't ever mess with Gray Yun. The whispers, the doubts, the sneers that this scrawny pretty boy couldn't possibly be a real fighter, all of it died in an instant. The two fights that took place in that classroom had solidified Gray Yun's place. He was no longer the rumored kid. He was the proven one. And the bullies who had tested him paid the price in more than blood. Evan, one of the boys who had gone after Gray, understood far too late what he had done. Evan, you screwed up the situation even more, he thought, dread creeping in. There's no way I can turn this situation around. I'm fucked. Because in a world ruled by hierarchy, losing to Gray Yun didn't just hurt. It dropped you, publicly, permanently, in the ranking that governed everything. Colton had already learned it. Now Evan learned it too. If Colton Choi and Evan you were both defeated, the other students calculated, I'm game over for sure. The fear spread like a chill through the class. They still couldn't quite believe it, though. It's 'cause everyone thinks they might beat him, one student reasoned, 'cause he just looks like a pretty boy. Even after he's proven how cruel he is, they just can't believe what they saw. That is the strange curse Gray Yun carries, his own face works against him. He looks soft, harmless, breakable. And so people keep underestimating him, keep testing him, keep throwing themselves at him, no matter how many times he proves them wrong. Is he human, one wondered, watching him? What did he do that? It's different, another thought. It's not like back then. By the end of it, the verdict was in. "Hey, your class is new number 1, someone announced, and even they could barely believe the words. "Snah, I can't believe it. That kid is unbeatable." "You will believe it," another warned, "if you see him fight. That's right, he's a little weird." Gray Yun, the small quiet transfer student, was now the undisputed top of Class 5, a title he never wanted and never asked for, won through nothing but his refusal to lose. "If you think about it," one student mused, "it's kind of like a kid's world running amok. A world where children fought like animals over rank and fear, and a boy who just wanted to be left alone had become its reluctant king." But here is where the story opens up, because a reputation this loud does not stay contained. What began as a classroom incident quickly became the hot topic among Unjiang High students, and then it spilled beyond Unjiang entirely. Without even realizing it, Gray Yun had become a name that fighters in other schools were starting to hear, a mystery they wanted to solve, a target they wanted to claim. And one of those fighters was about to make Gray his personal obsession. His name was Hugo Yun, though everyone called him Helmet, because his bandaged head made him look like he was wearing one. Though he had been defeated by Gray Yun in the earlier chaos, Helmet was still a proud delinquent of Yusun High, the self-proclaimed second-grade delinquent, and losing had wounded his pride in a way he could not let go of. "I feel like my dome is gonna crack," he groaned, his head throbbing under the bandages, his mind gnawing at his humiliation. Snap! Snap! "What's Helmet's deal today?" his friends wondered. "He looks pissed." He was pissed, because he had lost to a scrawny Unjiang kid, and now the whole thing was eating him alive. And then Helmet got a phone call that made it so much worse. His union, the larger network of fighters he answered to, was holding a conference, and they had handed him a task. "So you're starting a union conference with everyone but me," he snapped into the phone, insulted. "What?" Then came the order that made his blood boil. "How the fuck am I supposed to find and crush that Unjiang fucker in one day? It's all just a sick joke to fuck me over." They wanted him to hunt down the mysterious Unjiang fighter, identify him, and crush him, and they'd given him a single day to do it. It was an impossible, humiliating assignment, and Helmet knew it. "I don't fucking know," he muttered, hanging up. "I'll have to find a way." This is one of the sharp truths weak hero keeps returning to: the fighters at the bottom of the hierarchy are always being used by the ones above them. Helmet wasn't really an enemy of Gray's. He was a pawn, handed a task designed to make him fail, so that the bigger players could keep him in his place. The Union didn't care whether Helmet found the Unjiang fighter. They cared about keeping their underlings scrambling and desperate. And so an exhausted, wounded, resentful boy was sent to hunt a target he'd never seen, in a school he didn't attend, with a deadline built to break him. Helmet knew the task was a trap. To be real, he thought, for me to infiltrate Unjiang High alone and try to identify that one fucker is pretty damn reckless. Walking into a rival school to hunt an unknown fighter was a good way to get jumped and beaten. So Helmet did what people in his position do: he looked for someone else to take the risk for him. And he found his answer in a naive classmate from his cram school, someone eager to please, someone who happened to know a few Unjiang students. "Is there someone you're looking for at Unjiang High?" the classmate offered helpfully. "Oh, it's just that there are a few Unjiang students at the cram school I go to. I could help look for him, maybe." And Helmet, cynical to the core, saw the perfect out. It might not be a bad look for me, he calculated, to have this pushover dumbass check out his cram school. Just to show that I made the effort, and nothing more. He didn't expect the kid to actually find Gray. He just wanted cover, an excuse to bring back to his union so he wouldn't be punished for failing. "Hey, seaweed brain," he said, "so where's this cram school you go to?" It was a small, cynical maneuver by a small, cynical boy. But small maneuvers have a way of setting big things in motion. Because this is how the world of weak hero works. Gray Yun defeats a few bullies in a classroom, wanting nothing more than to be left in peace. That victory becomes a rumor. The rumor spreads to other schools. A humiliated delinquent named Helmet gets ordered by his union to hunt the source of that rumor. Helmet, to save his own skin, sends a naive cram school kid to scout. And step by step, link by link, a net begins to close around a boy who did nothing but refuse to be a victim. Gray doesn't know any of it is happening. He's just trying to study, to survive, to keep his vow. But the machine of violence he stepped into is far larger than one classroom, and it is grinding slowly, inevitably, in his direction. And that is the tragedy underneath all of Gray Yun's victories. Every fight he wins makes him stronger in reputation and more alone in reality. Every enemy he defeats sends 3 more circling. He climbs a hierarchy he never wanted to climb, becomes a target he never wanted to be, all because he cannot bring himself to lose, and cannot bring himself to simply kneel. Colton is broken. Evan is broken. Helmet is obsessed. Ben Park is still scheming somewhere in the shadows, hunting for the alliance that will finally work. And now a union of fighters from other schools is starting to take an interest in the mysterious kid from Unjiang. You could see it in Gray's own cold reflection, the weight of what he'd become. I chained myself, and planned this whole thing, he thought, taking stock of the war closing in around him. Anything I can use, I will use. Whether it be tools or games, or whatever else. He knew the fights weren't over. He knew, better than anyone, that becoming the number 1 of his class only painted a bigger target on his back. And he prepared for it the only way he knew how, coldly, methodically, refusing to be caught off guard, refusing to lose. Helmet limped off toward his cram school scheme, his bandaged head throbbing, his pride in tatters, his impossible deadline ticking. The naive classmate set off to scout Unjiang, not understanding what he was really being used for. And somewhere in Unjiang High, Gray Yun sat at his desk, the new number 1 of Class 5, a legend to the students around him and a target to the fighters beyond the walls, quietly bracing for the next storm he could feel coming but could not yet see. The classroom had crowned him. The rumor had spread. And the union had marked him. Gray Yun had wanted nothing but to be left alone, and instead he had become the most talked about fighter in the district, hunted by people he'd never met, for reasons that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with the cruel machine of rank and pride that ruled their world. He kept his vow. He stayed number 1. But being number 1, in a world like this, only meant that everyone below you would spend every waking moment trying to pull you down. And they were coming. Gray Yun's story was only just getting started, and the net was already tightening. A girl thought she was doing a small favor. Just point out where some Unjiang student studied, nothing more. She had no idea that favor would bring a pack of gangsters crashing into a room full of innocent kids. And she had no idea that the boy they were hunting, the mysterious Unjang fighter, was about to walk through the door and change everything. This is the episode where Gray Yun stops being just a survivor, and starts becoming a hero. It began with Helmet's cynical little scheme. Ordered by his union to find and crush the Unjang fighter in a single day, Helmet had no intention of actually risking his neck. Just to show that I made the effort, and nothing more, he thought. So he leaned on a naive cram school kid to point him toward where Unjang students gathered. It's called Hero Cram School, the kid explained helpfully. There are high schoolers from Yusun and Unjang. Send me a screen cap of the location, Helmet said. It was, in his mind, a harmless bit of theater, a way to tell his union he tried without ever finding his target. Guess this is the least I could do, he thought, to keep it looking like a genuine attempt. Meanwhile, the story cut away to show us something else entirely: raw, ridiculous power. At an arcade, Jimmy Bay and Alex So faced off over a punching machine, one of those games that measures the strength of your hit. Hawk. Bottom tsh. The numbers climbed. 970. And then someone drove a punch into the machine so hard the display exploded upward. 999. The maximum. Looks like I won, one of them crowed. You cheated, you can't throw a freaking kick, the other protested. It's a flipping punching machine, and yet, punch is punch, no. It's a small comic moment, but it plants a seed. These fighters are monsters, and the world Gray lives in is full of people who can shatter a machine with a single blow. The stakes of every fight are real. Back at the cram school, Helmet's harmless theater turned ugly, fast. Because Helmet didn't come alone. He came with a crew, and cruelty travels in packs. Shut up and just show me the way, he snapped at the terrified kid guiding him. This way. This is all of them. Yeah, this is all of the Unjang students. Helmet swaggered into a room full of ordinary teenagers, kids whose only crime was attending the same cram school, and demanded answers. Anyone know a guy named Gray Yun? He barked. And the honest answers only frustrated him. Ah, I do know about him, one kid offered nervously, but just his name. Me too, said another. He came out of nowhere and became the number one of his class, apparently. He wasn't known for anything before that, so I don't know his face. No one knew what Gray Yun looked like. And here is the ugly truth of Helmet's position, he didn't even want to find him. Ha, he sighed, and that's all you nerds got for me? Yeah, this is actually much better for me. I'm just looking to show that I tried. I really don't want to run into that fucker again. He had been beaten by Gray once, and the memory scared him. He wasn't hunting a target. He was building an alibi. But that is exactly what makes what happened next so monstrous. Because when a bully has power, frustration, and a room full of people weaker than him, the violence doesn't need a reason. It just needs an excuse. Excuse me, one polite student said, trying to slip past. Could I please pass by? Oh, sure, go ahead, Helmet said, almost pleasant. And then, as the boy passed, pow. 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 He beat him down for nothing, for the crime of existing in his path. Whack. Crash. Yank. Helmet and his crew tore through the cram school, brutalizing kids who had nothing to do with any of it, kids who didn't fight, didn't scheme, didn't belong to any union. Innocent students, beaten bloody, simply because they were there and they were weak. This is one of weak heroes' darkest and most honest ideas. The violence in this world does not stay contained to the fighters who choose it. It spills outward, onto bystanders, onto the innocent, onto anyone unlucky enough to be nearby. Helmet didn't hate these kids. He didn't even know them. He beat them because he was frustrated and they couldn't stop him, and in the hierarchy he lived in, that was reason enough. It's the same cruelty that spat on Gray's book, scaled up, the strong hurting the weak not out of anger, but out of boredom, out of habit, out of the simple fact that no one was there to make them stop. And the girl who had started it all watched in dawning horror. Because it was her cram school, her connection, her helpful little favor that had brought these gangsters here. "Hey, do something and stop those kids," she pleaded. But the other students were as helpless as she was. "I'm just as scared as you," one whispered. "Is no one going to stop them?" And the guilt crashed down on her. "I shouldn't have ever started this," she thought, watching innocent kids get beaten because of a scheme she'd unknowingly enabled. Those freaks, she realized. They're complete gangsters. That's not right. It's a small, human moment of conscience in a world that keeps punishing conscience, a girl realizing too late that she'd handed a predator the keys to a room full of prey. That's not right. Those 3 words hang in the air. Because in the world of weak hero, everyone knows it's not right, and almost no one does anything about it. The students are too scared. The bystanders look away. The cruelty rolls on unopposed, because opposing it means becoming a target yourself, and no one wants to bleed for a stranger. That is the rule of this world. And Gray Yun is about to break it. Because as Helmet's fist came down again, as another innocent kid braced for another senseless beating, a hand shot out and caught it. "Hey, Helmet! Stop!" The word landed like a hammer. Everyone froze. A hand had closed around Helmet's fist, stopping it dead in the air, and at the end of that hand stood a small, thin, unremarkable boy with glasses and a cold, steady stare. Gray Yun had walked into the room. And the moment his hand closed around that fist, the entire dynamic of the cram school flipped on its head. Could it be, Helmet thought, a chill running through him, because some part of him already knew. He had been hunting the mysterious Unjang fighter all day, and he had been dreading finding him, and now here he was, holding Helmet's punch in the air as if it were nothing. This is the moment that defines Gray Yun, and it's worth understanding exactly why. He didn't come to the cram school looking for a fight. He didn't come to build a reputation or settle a score. He came because innocent people were being hurt, and he was the only one willing to stand between them and the fists. Everyone else in that room knew it was wrong. Gray Yun was the only one who acted. And that is the difference between Gray and every other fighter in this story. Ben Park fights for pride. Helmet fights for rank. Jimmy Bay fights for fun. The bullies fight because they can. But Gray Yun, the boy who just wants to be left alone, who swore only to never lose again, keeps ending up in exactly these moments, standing between the cruel and the helpless, not because he wants to, but because he cannot look away. He is not a hero by choice. He is a hero by conscience, dragged into every fight by the one thing he can't switch off, the refusal to watch the weak get crushed while he does nothing. Remember the boy from earlier chapters, the one who told himself over and over to just stay quiet, to become a bystander, to keep his head down and survive? That boy is standing in this cram school right now with his hand wrapped around a gangster's fist. He tried to be a bystander. He genuinely tried. But when the moment came, when innocent kids were bleeding and everyone else was frozen in fear, Gray Yun could not do it. The vow he made on that summer day wasn't only about himself. It was about never again standing by while something he could have stopped destroyed someone in front of him. Helmet stared at the small boy holding his fist, feeling the impossible strength in that thin arm, remembering the beating he'd taken once before, and understanding, with growing dread, exactly who had just arrived. The crew went still. The beaten kids looked up in disbelief. The guilty girl watched, breath held, as the boy she'd unknowingly helped hunt walked in and did the one thing no one else in the room had the courage to do. Gray Yun had found Helmet before Helmet found him. And now the hunter was the hunted. This is why Gray Yun grabs your heart. Not because he's strong, though he is. Not because he's clever, though he is that too. It's because in a world that has taught everyone to look away, to protect themselves, to let the weak fend for themselves, Gray Yun keeps choosing, again and again, to step in. He pays for it every time. Every intervention makes him a bigger target, brings more enemies, deepens the exhaustion of always being alert, always being hunted. And still he does it. He caught that fist knowing exactly what it would cost him, and he caught it anyway. The cram school held its breath. Helmet's fist trembled in Gray's grip. The innocent kids bled on the floor behind him. And Gray Yun, the weak hero, the small quiet boy who never wanted any of this, looked the gangster dead in the eye and refused, one more time, to let the cruelty win. He had spent his whole life being underestimated, hunted, and hurt. He had every reason in the world to keep his head down and walk away. Instead, he walked in. Because that is who Gray Yun is, the one person in the room who cannot stand by. The confrontation with Helmet was about to explode, the Union's hunt was closing in, and the storm around the weak hero was rising higher than ever. But Gray Yun was exactly where he always ended up, between the strong and the weak, alone, and unwilling to lose. And his story was only just getting started. Gray Yun had caught Helmet's fist, and everyone in the cram school braced for a brutal fight. But the fight never came. Because what happened next was stranger and more chilling than any beating. Helmet's own body betrayed him. His hand began to tremble, his memory dragged him back to a nightmare, and this episode reveals one of the deepest truths in all of Weak Hero, that Gray Yun doesn't just defeat his enemies. He teaches their bodies to be afraid of him forever. Hey, Helmet. Stop. Gray's hand closed around the fist, and Helmet spun, furious, ready to destroy whoever dared to grab him. Is it the loser from back there? Someone whispered, recognizing Gray. And at first, Helmet didn't place him. That one, he thought, who the fuck is he? I can't tell. Let's see if he can stay tough when we come face to face. He grabbed Gray, meaning to make an example of him in front of everyone. Oh my God, he's out of his mind, a girl gasped. Someone stop him. What if he gets annihilated too? The whole room expected to watch the scrawny kid get crushed. And then it happened. In that moment, Helmet's consciousness was filled with memories from that incident. The beating. The helplessness. The cold, methodical way this small boy had taken him apart. It all came flooding back, unbidden, unstoppable. Thump. Helmet's heartbeat spiked. Thump. His hand, gripping Gray's collar, began to shake. And the narration delivers the line that unlocks the whole scene. Fear is learned. Fear is learned. That is the horror of what Gray Yun does to people. He doesn't just win a fight and move on. He carves himself so deeply into his opponent's memory that their body remembers the terror even when their mind tries to forget it. Helmet came to that cram school swaggering, backed by his crew, certain of his dominance. But the instant he truly registered who was standing in front of him, all of that collapsed. What's going on, his crew wondered, watching their leader freeze. What the hell is he trembling for? Fuck, Helmet thought, panic rising, I was just trying to make a statement by coming here. What the hell is this demon doing here? This demon. Because that is what Gray Yun had become in Helmet's mind. Not a boy. A demon. Throb. Throb. Gray's hand, the one holding the fist, seemed to pulse with a threat that needed no words. Not against this monster, Helmet's terror screamed at him. I can't win. He's an insane demon. I can't win. And here is the truly devastating part, nothing had even happened yet. No punch had been thrown. No blood had been spilled. Gray had done nothing but stand there and hold a fist. And that was enough to reduce a proud, swaggering delinquent to a trembling wreck, because his body had already learned, the hard way, exactly what this small quiet boy was capable of. And then Weak Hero delivers one of its most psychologically brilliant moments. Because when the confrontation finally broke, when Helmet was somehow able to back away without the fight happening, the emotion he felt was not what you'd expect. That moment, the narration tells us, the emotion Helmet felt wasn't humiliation from failing to act. It wasn't shame that nothing had happened. It was relief. Just that. Relief. Think about what that means. Helmet had come to hunt Gray Yun. His entire reputation, his standing in his union, his pride, all of it depended on crushing this kid. And when the moment came to fight, the overwhelming feeling in his chest was gratitude that he didn't have to. He was so afraid, so thoroughly conditioned by his past defeat, that escaping the fight felt like a gift. That is how completely Gray Yun breaks people. Not with a single beating, but with a fear so deep that the mere thought of facing him again turns their courage to water. Colton experienced it. Now Helmet has too. Losing to Gray Yun isn't an event. It's a life sentence. And this is what makes Gray Yun such a frightening and fascinating protagonist. He is small, quiet, and outwardly harmless, but he leaves psychological scars that never fully heal. His enemies don't just respect him. They dread him, at a level beneath thought, beneath pride, in the animal part of the brain that remembers pain. Fear is learned, and Gray Yun is a very effective teacher. But then, having shown us the terror Gray inspires, Weak Hero does something beautiful. It gives him a moment of peace. Because after the confrontation, the story returns to Unjiang High, and something has changed. The school is quiet now. The bullies who once ruled the halls have been subdued, one, by the boy they underestimated. Even Colton Choi, once a feared tyrant, now comes to school just asleep, a broken shadow keeping his head down. So everything turned out just the way I thought it would in the beginning, Gray reflected. And for the first time, the storm around him had gone still. And in that stillness, we finally get to see what Gray Yun actually wants. The life I could only dream of, he thought, and it's not glory or power or fear. I don't even wish for an exciting and fun school life, he admitted. I wish I could just be peaceful. That's all. Just peace. A boy who has fought and bled and stayed alert every waking moment, who carries a vow born of trauma, whose body is a weapon and whose reputation is a curse, wants nothing more than to be a normal student in a quiet classroom. And in this rare, precious moment, he almost gets it. Gray Yun, for the first time, put his head down in class and slept. It's such a small thing, a boy napping at his desk, but in the context of everything he's endured, it's deeply moving. This is the boy who told himself that staying alert every moment was exhausting. And now, finally, the halls are quiet enough that he can close his eyes. A kind classmate even draws the curtain to shade him, watching over him as he sleeps. You're supposed to draw the curtain for maximum sleep potential, the classmate fussed gently. I fell asleep, Gray thought, almost in wonder. Have I even slept this well recently? For once, no one was coming for him. For once, he could just be tired, and rest, like any other kid. And there's warmth in it too, the beginning of something Gray Yun has never really had, ordinary human connection. A classmate chats with him easily. Don't you think our class is a bit quiet lately, one says. Well, yeah. Thanks to Gray Yun. I don't think I've ever felt an atmosphere like this at Unjiang High. We're on duty together next week, the classmate adds, casual and friendly. It's nothing dramatic. Just two kids talking about cleaning duty. But for Gray, who has spent his whole life as an island, who slips away from every group and walks home alone, this small ordinary friendliness is something rare and precious. The peace he fought for is finally, briefly, real. Man, our class really did get quiet, the classmate marvels. And Gray Yun, for a moment, gets to be just a boy in a quiet class, not a demon, not a target, not the weak hero. Just Gray. But weak hero is too honest to let that peace last, because peace like this is always fragile in a world built on violence. Even as Gray naps and chats and tastes something like a normal life, the machine keeps turning in the background. Ben Park is still out there, still scheming, still nursing the humiliation of being dismissed in front of a whole class. 1. There's no reason for me to apologize, Gray had told him. And 2. I have no idea who the fuck you are. Son of a bitch, Ben seethed, replaying it. How dare you, you no-named loser. That wound has not healed. It has festered. And Ben is not fighting alone. He's begging his cousins for help now, calling in family, pulling every string he can find. Hey, we're cousins, right, he pleaded with Royce Na. Just help me so I don't look like a bitch, please. He's still hunting for the alliance that will finally break Gray, still convinced that with enough bodies, enough fighters, enough scheming, he can bring the weak hero down. And circling above all of it is Jimmy Bay, the monster from the arcade, the fighter everyone expects to eventually collide with Gray. With Ben, if I can just wait it out, one schemer calculated, it does look like Jimmy Bay will take care of him. The pieces are still moving. The web is still tightening. That is the bittersweet heart of this episode. Gray Yun finally, briefly, gets the thing he wants most, a quiet classroom, a moment of rest, the beginnings of a friend. And we, the audience, know it cannot last. Because his very existence, his refusal to lose, his willingness to stand up for the weak, guarantees that more fighters will keep coming. He terrifies his enemies so completely that they can never let it go. Helmet trembles at the memory of him. Colton sleeps in defeat. And Ben Park schemes, and Jimmy Bay waits, and the peace Gray earned with his fists is already beginning to crack at the edges. Gray Yun closed his eyes in that quiet classroom, the curtain drawn to shade him, a classmate keeping him company, and for one gentle moment he was not the demon of Unjiang High. He was just a tired boy who wanted to sleep. He had learned to make his enemies afraid, so afraid that facing him felt worse than any beating. He had won himself a fragile, hard-earned peace. But in the world of weak hero, peace is only the space between storms, and the next one was already gathering. Ben Park was scheming. Jimmy Bay was waiting. And the boy who wanted nothing but a quiet life was about to be dragged, once again, into a fight he never asked for. For now, though, Gray Yun slept. And his story was only just getting started. Gray Yun had beaten brutes, schemers, and gangsters. He had made grown fighters tremble at the memory of him. But this episode introduces an enemy unlike any he has faced, a boy who does not win with his fists at all. A boy who wins with money, manipulation, and a cruelty so cold it makes the brawlers look almost honest. His name is Philip Kim. And he is about to become the most dangerous thing in Gray Yun's world. But first, the usual challengers kept coming, because that is Gray Yun's curse. A cocky fighter from Class 1 sauntered up, sizing up the boy who had toppled Colton. "Ah, the Class 5 champ," he sneered. "Better stop acting cocky over taking a pushover like Colton." And then the casual threat that everyone at this school throws around like small change. "'Cause I might just," he said, "kill you." Gray met it with the same flat, unimpressed stare he gave everything. Another challenger. Another fighter who looked at the small quiet boy and saw an easy target. By now, we know how that story usually ends. But this episode was not really about him. He was just the warm-up. Because the story pulled back to introduce someone far more interesting, and far more sinister, Philip Kim, former number 1 of Wairo Middle School. And here is the twist that makes Philip so unsettling. He was never a talented fighter. Not really. Actually, the narration tells us plainly, he was never a talented fighter at all. So how did a mediocre fighter become the number 1 of his entire middle school? The answer is the scariest thing in this whole series. His specialty was influencing others. It all began with that. Philip Kim did not win fights. He engineered them. He would pick a target, always weak prey, always someone he had already sized up as beatable, and he would start beefing with them, provoking them, needling them, using any method he could find. And then, once the fight was inevitable, he would beat the shit out of them, going way further than most would consider enough. Not to win. To make an example. To ensure that everyone watching understood exactly what happened to people who crossed Philip Kim. And after, he was always sure that he would come out on top, because he never picked a fight he wasn't guaranteed to win. He always scanned the landscape for his next hunt, picking weak prey, the way a predator studies a herd for the slowest animal. But even that ruthlessness was not his real weapon. His real weapon was money. Philip Kim's parents own and run a big commercial real estate business, and that wealth let him fix any problem with ease. Where other fighters had only their fists, Philip had connections, cash, and the power to make trouble disappear. He could buy loyalty. He could buy silence. He could get a group of high schoolers into an upscale bar that would never normally let them through the door, just by making a phone call. The power of money, the narration calls it, and in Philip's hands it was more dangerous than any punch. This is what makes Philip Kim such a chilling addition to Weak Hero. Because up to now, the villains have been brutes. Colton, Jimmy Bay, Helmet, they hurt people with their bodies, and Gray could outthink and outfight them. But Philip does not fight like that. He manipulates. He isolates. He turns people against each other, buys the outcome he wants, and stands at a safe distance while others do his dirty work. Was it even possible for someone like him to become number 1, the story asks. And the answer is yes, because in a world where everyone respects strength, Philip figured out that fear and money can be a kind of strength too, and often a more effective one. They were fearless as a group, and the one at the center of it all, orchestrating everything, was Philip Kim, naturally rising to the highest position not by being the strongest, but by being the smartest and the most ruthless. And now Philip was on the move. He gathered his people at that upscale bar, a place no ordinary student could enter, and held court like a young king. "Welcome to our establishment," the staff said. "Your confidant is waiting in room 7. Because Philip had connections everywhere, doors opened for him that stayed locked for everyone else. His old middle school friends gathered around him, scattered now across different high schools but still orbiting his gravity. Larks Lee, and Tizzy, and Chad Jang, and others, all pulled back together by the boy who used to rule them. He looks intriguing, one newcomer said of Philip. And that is exactly the image Philip cultivates, charming, generous with food and drinks and easy laughter, right up until the moment he decides to destroy you. But under the charm, the calculation never stopped. Because Philip Kim had his eyes on Eunjang High, and on the fighters who had been making noise there. You could take over Eunjang any day, though, right, Philip, one of his friends said. Though you probably couldn't get through Ben Park. And Philip, sipping his drink, calculating as always, admitted there were a few fuckers messing with his mind. He was too proud, and too smart, to bother with small fries. Taking out small fries one by one, he thought, it's way too frivolous and time-consuming, and it doesn't do anything for my ego. Philip didn't want to beat nobodies. He wanted to seize control of something bigger, and to do that, he needed information, allies, and the right moment. These freaks, hot shit, he mused about the fighters on his radar. Let's ease into that over a few drinks. The night is still young. That single line tells you everything about how Philip Kim operates. While the brutes charge in swinging, Philip sits in a bar, drinking, gathering intelligence, taking his time, letting others exhaust themselves before he makes a single move. He is patient. He is connected. He is rich. And he has just added Gray Yun and the chaos at Eunjang to his list of interests. For a boy like Philip, Gray isn't an enemy to fight. He's a piece to be maneuvered, isolated, and eventually crushed by forces Gray can't even see coming. And weak hero drives the contrast home with a small, ugly scene back in the daylight. Because while Philip schemes in his bar, his kind of cruelty plays out on the ground. A bully spotted a target, a gray-haired student, and decided to have some fun. That's the one who's acting like tough shit after taking Colton, he sneered. Look at him, he probably even smells like a loser, haha. He shook a bottle of cola until it was ready to burst. Perfect timing, he grinned. Shake. Shake. And then, shoot, he sprayed it all over the boy, soaking him, humiliating him for the entertainment of everyone watching. Slosh. The victim stood there, drenched, dripping, while his tormentors laughed. It's a small moment, but it echoes everything this series is about. The strong humiliating the weak for sport. The cruelty that needs no reason. The way this world grinds down anyone who looks like an easy target. And it connects directly to Philip Kim, because this is his world, the food chain he thrives in, the culture of casual cruelty that a manipulator like him can exploit and weaponize. A shaken bottle of cola, a soaked student, a circle of laughing bullies, this is the soil that grows people like Philip Kim, and people like the enemies Gray Yun keeps having to face. And that brings us to the end of this chapter of Gray Yun's story, and the beginning of something much larger. Because in these first 10 episodes, we have watched a small, thin, quiet boy walk into a school ruled by violence and refuse, again and again, to be a victim. We watched him beat a crew that outnumbered him. We watched him humiliate the feared Ben Park without throwing a punch, and then survive the army Ben sent to destroy him. We learned his secret, the vow he made on a summer day to never lose again, born from a wound he still carries. We watched him become the number one of his class, terrify his enemies so completely that fear itself became learned, and earn, for one fragile moment, the quiet peace he actually wanted. And we watched him do the one thing that defines him above all else, step between the strong and the weak, again and again, when everyone else looked away. But now the game is changing. The brutes and the schemers Gray has faced so far were dangerous, but they were simple. Philip Kim is neither. He is a new kind of threat, one that cannot be solved with a fist to the throat or a handful of dirt. He fights with money, with manipulation, with patience and connections and the willingness to destroy people from a distance. He sits in his bar, calm and smiling, and adds Gray Yun to his plans, and Gray does not even know he exists yet. Gray Yun wanted nothing more than a quiet life. He wanted to study in peace, to sleep in a calm classroom, to be left alone. He has fought and bled and terrified an entire district just trying to be allowed that small, ordinary wish. And now, just as he tastes a moment of peace, a far greater danger is gathering in the shadows, a boy with a rich family and a cruel mind and all the patience in the world. The brawlers came at Gray head-on. Philip Kim will come at him sideways, through schemes he can't see and people he can't reach. The weak hero has survived every fighter this world has thrown at him. But the real war, the war against the people who fight with money and manipulation instead of muscle, is only just beginning. Philip Kim raised his glass in that bar and smiled, because the night was still young. And Gray Yun's story was only just getting started.